Series 11 is the newest series of the long-running sci-fi TV drama Doctor Who, and this series stars Jodie Whittaker, Bradley Walsh, Tosin and Mandip Gill, and is written mostly by Chris Chibnall. Before I properly get into Series 11, I thought the best thing I could do is give you a brief backstory as to my history with the show. When the show came back in 2005, after I think a 20-year hiatus, I was absolutely loving it. And those first 4 seasons that were run by Russell T Davies are brilliant. And they honestly have some of my favourite TV moments ever in those. Then Series 5 came along and the showrunner changed from Russell T Davies to Stephen Moffat, and we had 2 doctors in the shape of Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi. I'm going to be honest. From about Series 7 onwards, I started to lose interest in the show. I still watched it every so often, but around about the time that Amy and Rory left as companions was when I started gradually losing interest in the show, and I didn't watch it as much as I used to when David Tennant was the Doctor, or even during Matt Smith's first run as the Doctor. Which is why I was surprised that Series 11 is the first full series of Doctor Who that I've sat down and watched every episode of as they've aired since probably Series 5. All the other series in between, I've just skipped in and out of. But here, with Series 11, this has been the first time I've sat down, watched every episode on the Sunday that it airs, and genuinely been interested as to where it goes. I don't necessarily think Series 11 is the best series we've had of Doctor Who, but I've been more intrigued as to where this one plays out than a lot of other previous series. So first of all, what does Series 11 do well? The acting is really bloody good. Jodie Whittaker takes a bit of getting used to as the Doctor, and it's not just because she's a woman, it's mainly because I feel like they don't really know what her specific personality trait is until about halfway through the series. Whereas with David Tennant, his personality is distinguishable from the moment he appears in the Christmas Invasion. And the same even goes for Matt Smith and Christopher Eccleston. But with Jodie Whittaker, I think it takes about a good chunk of the series until you really know what her Doctor's about, and it suddenly clicks like, oh, that's what kind of Doctor she is. Because that's one thing I just really like about this show. The fact that the Doctor changes every so often into a new person means that he can inhabit an entirely new, different type of personality. There are certain traits that carry on from each Doctor that make you go, oh yeah, that is the Doctor. But each Doctor has their own way of doing things, and Jodie Whittaker, I think it's quite clear from, like, especially the last few episodes, that her Doctor is all about exploration and wanting to find new things, and just wants to inject a bit more fun into the whole exploration side of what she does. And I really like that whole aspect of her Doctor. She also is just really good in a lot of scenes in this series. She adds a lot of humour to the Doctor. She adds a lot of, I want to say drama, but I think David Tennant handled the drama aspect a bit better, because there are some points where, and this is not her performance, this is just the writing, which I'll get a bit more into in a minute, but there are a couple of times where she is asking questions like she doesn't know what it is she's looking at. And in a sense, I can kind of understand that coming from the companions. And if the Doctor genuinely doesn't know, again, I can kind of understand that. But she does it so much in the series that it's kind of like, you're the Doctor, you should know what these things are. I guess I know that it doesn't apply to everything, but she just does it so much that she might as well just have been another companion instead of the Doctor. Do you get what I mean? I mean, it's kind of hard to explain if you haven't seen it, but she does it quite a bit where she either points out the obvious or re-asks questions that we're already thinking, and it's like, yeah, just stop asking the question and just get on with answering it. The companions in this series are also really good, specifically Graham and Ryan. Their relationship throughout the whole series, I think, is the series' saving grace. Their relationship is just really interesting to watch play out throughout the whole series, especially how it starts in the first episode and then develops through to the end with some quite satisfying things that happen in the later episodes that really do tug at your heartstrings. And like I said, their relationship and how they play off of each other is definitely one of the things that saves Series 11 from being a total disaster. Yaz is okay as a companion, but there are quite a few times where she just feels like the writers don't quite know what to do with her. Ryan and Graham, you very clearly know what their dynamic is and what their purpose is, and there's a couple of episodes where they have specific things to do because of who they are. Yaz, 9 out of 10 times, unless it's the episode Demons of the Punjab, just feels like she's there and she's not really doing much. It's a shame, because I can tell she's a really talented actress, and I kind of wish they'd give her a bit more to do, but yeah, a lot of the time during the series, she just kind of feels a little bit useless. Other things I liked about Series 11 is that the cinematography is fantastic. I don't think Doctor Who has ever looked this epic and cinematic before. It's just honestly brilliant to look at. The score is also really well done. They do a few things a little differently compared to previous seasons, which do go for a lot more of a orchestral soundtrack, whereas this one is a bit more electronic, a bit more ambient, and I really did appreciate that little twist. It's subtle at first, but it really works, especially for some specific episodes. It really does pay off. Also, I really appreciated how a lot of the characters, no matter where they are in space or time, feel grounded in a sense of reality. I mean, this mostly does apply to the companions, their stories, and their families. But even when they're on, like, a distant planet or years back in time, every character somewhat feels a lot more grounded in reality compared to previous series, which has characters that either don't feel interesting or just feel very cartoony and caricature-y. Whereas here, everyone feels very grounded, no matter whether they're an alien or whether they're, you know, a human from years ago or years in the future. I just like that there's a certain sense of reality that the show is grounded in this series. Sometimes it doesn't work, and I'll get more onto that in a bit, but for the most part, I really do appreciate that. Unfortunately, though, that's kind of where my positives stop for the series. Everything else doesn't quite work. The writing is not the best that Doctor Who's ever seen. I mean, it is slightly refreshing, especially when you're coming off of Stephen Moffat's style of writing, where by the time he had finished, everything was so convoluted and hard to follow that it was kind of hard to watch, especially during Matt Smith's reign. The more his Doctor went on, the stories just got more interconnected and more convoluted that it was really hard to follow. Here, the writing is a little bit more simplistic, which works for the fact that every episode follows its own specific story and none of them overlap. None of them are like a two-part episode, or none of them have a reoccurring storyline or anything like that. They are all their own story. Unfortunately, I also mean the writing is simplistic in the sense that the way the characters talk and the resolutions for a lot of the episodes are either incredibly predictable or very, very lackluster. Even when you have a really, really good episode like Kablam, the way the episode finishes and resolves itself and the twist that happens kind of ruins it. And I don't want to say that the reveal of who the bad guy is in Kablam is bad. I'm more specifically talking about the thing that the person is trying to do that I think is kind of stretching it. And there's a couple of times that happens in this series. For example, The Witchfinders. Perfectly good episode, up until the ending, which is a bit crap. This kind of rinse and repeats itself throughout most of the series. I would say with the exception of the first episode and Rosa. Those are probably the best episodes from start to finish. They have a clear through line, they know what they are, they stick to it, and don't do much else with it. The writing could be better in those episodes, but again, they do a good job of maintaining a specific tone and writing style throughout. Whereas a lot of the other episodes in this series either have poor writing from the start or let themselves go towards the end. Also, just going back to the whole grounded in reality aspect, it works for when you have characters that feel grounded in reality. But when you have an episode that kind of grounds itself in a reality for that episode, but then has typical over-the-top and bizarre monsters that you'd expect to see in Doctor Who, the contrast doesn't quite fit. And my best example is going back to Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who, and that was like Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. The whole feel and tone of that era of Doctor Who was fun, entertaining, didn't take itself that seriously, and was a little bit campy. So when you had a very odd and bizarre alien in it, like the Slitheen or the Absorbaloff, it kind of works. Even the Ood, which were a reoccurring alien in that series, worked because of the whole tone of that series. Whereas here, because it is a little bit more realistic in a sense, and just kind of grounds itself in a reality, whenever you have an over-the-top-ish villain or alien like the Pating, which is this little cute gremlin little creature that eats everything and anything, it doesn't quite fit. Also, why the fuck is it called the Pating? That is probably the stupidest name I've heard for an alien in ages. That's another thing. The alien names and the planet names and just names of alien things in general are as generic as you can possibly get in this series. The Stenzar, the Ux, Ranskor Avkolos. It's like just shove a load of vowels together and you have an alien planet name. You don't have anything as, inventive as like the Slitheen, which are from Raxacora Flapomatorius. You don't have anything as quirky or as creative as that. It's just generic on generic. It doesn't quite... Well, it works, I suppose, for the sake of the episodes, but when you look back at it, it's just like, yeah, they could have thought of a better name for that. Also, there's quite a few times throughout this series where the show tries to tackle current political and topical issues, whether it be racial diversity, a certain president of the United States, certain things like that reoccur throughout the series, and they feel as out of place as you would expect them to feel. Especially the Trump stuff, because that stuff appears in probably the last episode you'd think it would appear in. the one about giant spiders. An episode about giant spiders should not take itself that seriously. I mean, you're talking about giant fucking spiders, for crying out loud. How can you take that seriously? Even Eight-Legged Freaks, a movie from about 20 years ago, knows not to take a premise like giant spiders seriously. So the fact that you have a giant spider premise, and then you shove in political commentary on Trump and stuff like that, it's gonna stick out like a sore thumb. And it's quite cringy when it happens, because they're not even subtle about it. At first you're like, oh, okay, that's a little jab towards Trump, it's fine. But they keep doing it, and do it a bit more, and it gets quite irritating. In the end, I do think Series 11 is a decent series of Doctor Who. It's not great or groundbreaking, but it's not terrible or utter shit either. I do think it does have some rewatchability, and the episodes that are good are really good, even if the endings do kind of ruin them, or something does ruin it. For the most part, those episodes are good. And if I had to say what my favourite episodes are, then my favourite episodes are probably The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Rosa, Kablam, and the series finale, which is titled The Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos. Those are probably my favourites in the series, just because they work. A lot of the other episodes, like, what was it, this Tsanga Conundrum or something like that, that episode just doesn't quite work because it's got a load of conflicting tones working against it, and also it's a really forgettable episode. But that being said, there are other episodes like It Takes You Away, which, like I said previously, sets up one tone and feel and style, but then changes it up at the last minute. And I do think the ending does slightly work, if it is a little bit weird. But yeah, there's no consistency in the series, tone-wise or even writing-wise. Like, the writing is never awful, but it's also never amazing either. And yeah, it's just all these things coming together to make probably the most meh series of Doctor Who I've seen in a while. But that being said, when an episode is good, it's actually pretty damn good, and is some of the best of recent years in Doctor Who. Not some of the best in Doctor Who history, because, I mean, you're trying to compare episodes in this series with previous episodes like Vincent and the Doctor, or Blink, or, you know, those fantastic episodes from previous years. They're not even up there. But for what it's worth, and for what this series was trying to do, the good episodes in this series aren't half bad. In the end, I'm going to give Doctor Who Series 11 a 7 out of 10. Maybe dipping down to a 6.5, but I think 7 is a good middle ground. Yeah, if you enjoyed this series, I'd be happy to know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you want me to talk about and review the previous 10 series of Doctor Who, I would happily do that, because I've been dying to talk about the David Tennant era of Doctor Who on this channel for quite some time now. So yeah, if you want to see that, please put in the comments below, because I will happily oblige. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!